Marcus Rivera never imagined that a simple act of kindness on a rain-soaked Tuesday evening would unravel the carefully constructed walls around his heart and thrust him into a world where billion-dollar decisions were made over morning coffee. All he saw was a stranded woman standing beside a gleaming Rolls Royce Phantom, its hazard lights blinking like distress signals in the gathering dusk, steam rising from beneath its pristine hood. What he didn't see coming was that this woman, with her designer heels sinking into the muddy shoulder of Highway 92, would turn out to be Isabella Montenegro, the enigmatic CEO of one of the most powerful banking empires in the Western Hemisphere. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. And what he definitely didn't expect was that helping her would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and the price of second chances. This isn't just another story about unlikely romance or rags-to-riches dreams. This is about what happens when two people from completely different worlds discover that sometimes the most unexpected connections are the ones that change everything. It's about a man who lost everything and found himself rebuilding not just engines, but hope. It's about a woman who built an empire, but forgot how to trust her own heart. And it's about the moment fate decides that maybe, just maybe, some people deserve a shot at something extraordinary. The October rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof of Rivera's auto repair with a persistence that matched Marcus Rivera's determination to finish the brake job on the ancient Honda Civic before closing time. Each droplet seemed to carry the weight of his exhaustion, a reminder that he'd been working 16-hour days for the past 3 months, just to keep the lights on and food on the table for his 8-year-old daughter, Sophia. The small garage, tucked between a laundromat and a discount grocery store in the working-class neighborhood of Millfield, had become both his sanctuary and his prison. Within these grease-stained walls, he could lose himself in the familiar rhythm of mechanical work, but the harsh fluorescent lights also illuminated the harsh reality of his circumstances. Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his work-stained hand, leaving a smudge of oil across his temple. At 34, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had learned to shoulder responsibility without complaint, though the weight of single parenthood and financial struggle had etched premature lines around his dark brown eyes. His thick black hair, perpetually tousled from running his hands through it during moments of frustration, framed a face that spoke of Mexican heritage and Midwestern resilience. Despite the constant worry that gnawed at his stomach like hunger, Marcus possessed an innate kindness that drew people to him, a warmth that had survived even the devastating blow of losing his wife Carmen to cancer 3 years earlier. The garage itself told the story of a man making do with what he had. Tools hung from pegboards with the military precision of someone who understood that organization was the difference between efficiency and chaos. The concrete floor, stained with decades of automotive fluids, had been swept clean despite the age and wear. 2 hydraulic lifts dominated the main bay, their yellow paint chipped but their mechanism sound, maintained with the careful attention Marcus paid to everything that kept his small business running. A small office space in the corner housed a battered metal desk, a computer that belonged in a museum, and a bulletin board covered with Sophia's artwork alongside unpaid invoices and reminder notices. The radio crackled to life from its perch. On the workbench, the local news anchor's voice cutting through the sound of rain and the occasional rumble of thunder. Traffic advisory. Highway 92 experiencing delays due to heavy rainfall and limited visibility. Motorists are advised to exercise extreme caution, especially in the construction zones between exits 12 and 15. Marcus glanced toward the large bay doors, noting how the storm had transformed the usual Tuesday evening traffic into something resembling a slow-moving river of headlights and taillights. Weather like this was both a blessing and a curse for his business. People drove more carefully, reducing the likelihood of accidents that might bring him emergency repair work. But it also meant that his regular customers might postpone non-essential maintenance, further straining his already tight cash flow. Carlos Mendoza, his part-time helper and the closest thing Marcus had to a business partner, emerged from beneath the hood of a Ford pickup truck, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better decades. At 19, Carlos possessed an intuitive understanding of engines that reminded Marcus of himself at that age, before life had taught him that talent alone wasn't always enough to guarantee success. The young man's eagerness to learn and willingness to work for wages that barely qualified as minimum wage made him invaluable to the struggling garage, even if Marcus sometimes felt guilty about being unable to pay him what he truly deserved. "Storm's getting worse," Carlos observed, glancing toward the windows where rain streaked the glass in diagonal patterns. "Maybe we should call it a night after this brake job. Roads are gonna be nasty, and Sophia's probably wondering where you are." Marcus nodded, though he knew that calling it a night meant turning away any potential customers who might brave the weather in search of help. Every dollar mattered when rent was due in a week, and Sophia needed new shoes before the school year progressed much further. Still, Carlos was right about Sophia. His daughter would be finishing her homework at the kitchen table of their small apartment above Mrs. Chun's convenience store, probably glancing at the clock every few minutes and wondering when her father would climb the narrow stairs that led to their modest home. The thought of Sophia brought both comfort and anxiety. She had inherited her mother's bright smile and quick wit, but also her father's stubborn determination to see the good in every situation. At 8 years old, she possessed a maturity that both impressed and worried Marcus. Children shouldn't have to understand concepts like, "We can't afford that right now," or "maybe next month." But Sophia had adapted to their circumstances with a grace that sometimes broke her father's heart. She never complained about the second-hand clothes or the generic cereal, never asked why they couldn't take vacations like some of her classmates, never questioned why Daddy worked such long hours. Instead, she would greet him each evening with a hug that made every sacrifice worthwhile and stories about her day that reminded him why he fought so hard to build a better future for both of them. The sudden chirping of his cell phone interrupted Marcus's thoughts. He glanced at the screen and smiled despite his exhaustion. Sophia's name appeared alongside a photo of her gap-toothed grin from last Christmas, back when he could still afford to make the holiday special. He wiped his hands on his coveralls before answering, knowing she would lecture him if she detected even a hint of grease on his voice. "Hey Mia, how was school today?" "Hi Daddy." "School was good. Mrs. Patterson said my essay about community helpers was one of the best in the class. I wrote about you and how you fix cars to help people get to work and take care of their families." Sophia's voice carried the innocent pride that only children possess, the kind that could transform a struggling mechanic into a hero with nothing more than a shift in perspective. Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion. "That's wonderful. Sweetheart, I'm proud of you. Are you coming home soon? I made spaghetti like you taught me, and I set the table with the good plates." The good plates were actually mismatched dishes from the thrift store, but Sophia treated them like fine china whenever she wanted to make dinner special. "I'll be up in about an hour, okay? Just finishing up one last job." "Okay, Daddy. Be careful driving in the rain. I love you." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I love you too, Mia, more than all the stars in the sky." After ending the call, Marcus returned to the brake job with renewed focus. The sooner he finished, the sooner he could join Sophia for dinner and help her with any homework that might be giving her trouble. The Honda's brake pads were more worn than he had initially assessed, requiring additional work that would eat into his profit margin if he honored his original estimate. Such was the constant balancing act of running a small business with a conscience. He could charge the customer for the additional work and risk developing a reputation for hidden fees, or he could absorb the cost and hope that honest dealing would eventually pay dividends in customer loyalty. The decision was made easier by the fact that the Honda belonged to Janet Morrison, a single mother who cleaned offices downtown and relied on her 15-year-old car to get to 3 different jobs each week. Janet reminded Marcus of Carmen in some ways, possessed of the same fierce determination to provide for her children, regardless of the obstacles life placed in her path. Charging her extra for work that needed to be done anyway would be like kicking someone who was already down, something Marcus's conscience simply wouldn't allow. As he worked, the steady rhythm of his movements provided a meditative quality that helped quiet the constant chatter of worry in his mind. There was something deeply satisfying about mechanical work, about diagnosing problems and implementing solutions that could be measured in concrete terms. Cars didn't lie or make empty promises. They either ran properly or they didn't, and the difference was usually a matter of knowledge, effort, and attention to detail. In a world that often felt chaotic and unpredictable, the garage represented a space where Marcus could exercise control, where his skills and experience translated directly into results. The sound of a car door slamming in the parking lot barely registered above the noise of the storm, but the subsequent knocking on the bay door commanded immediate attention. Marcus glanced at Carlos, who shrugged and moved toward the door with the casual wariness of someone accustomed to unexpected visitors during evening hours. The garage officially closed at 6, but Marcus had never been one to turn away someone in genuine need, especially during weather like this. "We're closed," Carlos called through the door, "but if it's an emergency, give us a minute." "Please," came a woman's voice, muffled by the metal door but carrying an urgency that cut through the ambient noise of rain and thunder. "My car broke down on the highway. I saw your lights and hoped someone might be able to help." Marcus made eye contact with Carlos and nodded. Emergency roadside assistance wasn't their specialty, but turning away a stranded motorist during a storm violated every principle of human decency that Marcus held dear. Carlos activated the hydraulic door mechanism and the large bay door began its slow ascent, revealing the dark parking lot and the woman who stood just outside the reach of the overhead lights. The first thing Marcus noticed was the incongruity of her presence in this neighborhood. Her clothing, while practical for the weather, spoke of quality and expense. The second thing he noticed was her car, and it stopped him dead in his tracks. Parked at an angle that suggested hasty arrival, a Rolls Royce Phantom sat gleaming despite the rain, its distinctive grille and hood ornament unmistakable even in the dim light. The vehicle was worth more than Marcus would earn in 5 years, possibly 10, and seeing it in the parking lot of his modest garage felt like discovering a piece of fine art in a pawn shop. The woman herself appeared to be in her early 30s, with auburn hair that hung in damp waves around her shoulders and green eyes that held an intelligence and intensity that seemed to take in everything at once. Despite being caught in the rain, she maintained an air of composure that suggested she was accustomed to handling difficult situations. Her coat, while clearly expensive, was practical rather than flashy, and her shoes, though designer, were chosen for function rather than fashion. Everything about her appearance suggested wealth, but wealth tempered by practicality and intelligence rather than ostentation. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," she began, her voice carrying a slight accent that Marcus couldn't immediately place. "My car started making strange noises about 5 miles back, and then it just lost power. I managed to coast off the highway, but I'm afraid I don't know much about automotive mechanics." Marcus found himself momentarily speechless, not because of her beauty, though she was undeniably attractive, but because of the sheer impossibility of the situation. In 3 years of running the garage, he had never seen a vehicle worth more than $30,000, and here stood a woman whose car cost more than most people's houses. asking for his help with the same polite desperation he had heard from countless other stranded motorists. Of course, Marcus finally managed, wiping his hands on his coveralls in a futile attempt to make himself more presentable. "Let me grab some tools, and we'll take a look. I'm Marcus Rivera, by the way." She extended a hand, and Marcus was surprised by the firmness of her grip. "Isabella Montenegro. Thank you so much for agreeing to help. I was beginning to think I'd be spending the night in my car." Carlos had already begun gathering the basic diagnostic equipment they would need for a roadside assessment, his eyes wide with the kind of wonder that comes from seeing something extraordinary in mundane circumstances. Marcus could hardly blame him. The Rolls Royce represented a level of automotive engineering that existed in a completely different universe from the aging domestic vehicles that comprised their usual clientele. "Where exactly did you break down?" Marcus asked, as they prepared to venture into the storm. "About half a mile west of the construction zone, on Highway 92. There's a wide shoulder, so the car's safely off the road, but I was worried about staying there alone in this weather." Marcus nodded, understanding her concern. Highway 92 could be dangerous during good weather, and the combination of rain, reduced visibility, and construction equipment created conditions that even experienced drivers found challenging. The fact that she had managed to find his garage suggested either remarkable luck or remarkable resourcefulness. The rain hit them like a physical force the moment they stepped outside, soaking through their clothes within seconds despite their attempts to hurry. Marcus had grabbed a large golf umbrella from the office, but it proved woefully inadequate against the wind-driven precipitation. By the time they reached the Rolls Royce, all three of them were thoroughly drenched, though. Isabella seemed to take the discomfort in stride with the kind of grace that suggested she had faced worse challenges than getting caught in a thunderstorm. The interior of the Rolls Royce was a revelation in luxury that Marcus tried not to gawk at too obviously. Hand-stitched leather seats, real wood trim, and enough technology to run a small spacecraft created an environment that felt more like a high-end hotel suite than the inside of a vehicle. Isabella slipped behind the wheel with the familiarity of someone who had driven this particular car many times, though Marcus noticed that she handled the controls with the careful attention of someone who respected the machine rather than took it for granted. "It started with a slight hesitation when I accelerated," Isabella explained as she attempted to start the engine. "Then a grinding noise from somewhere under the hood, and finally it just stopped responding altogether. The engine turned over, but refused to catch, producing the kind of labored sound that indicated a fundamental problem rather than something simple like a dead battery or flooded engine." Marcus listened carefully to the rhythm and tone of the attempted ignition, his experienced ear already beginning to form hypotheses about the potential causes. The sound was consistent with fuel system problems, though electrical issues couldn't be ruled out without proper diagnostic equipment. "You mind popping the hood?" Marcus asked. "I'd like to take a look at the engine before we try anything else." Isabella reached for the hood release with the confidence of someone familiar with the process, though Marcus suspected that this might be her first experience with automotive problems serious enough to require professional attention. The hood of the Rolls Royce rose with the smooth precision of German engineering, revealing an engine bay that was simultaneously familiar and alien. The basic principles remained the same as any internal combustion engine, but the level of sophistication and the quality of materials represented automotive engineering at its finest. Even in the dim light provided by Marcus's flashlight, the problem became apparent within minutes. A critical fuel line had developed a leak, allowing precious gasoline to drip onto the engine block rather than reaching the combustion chambers where it belonged. The leak wasn't catastrophic, but it was sufficient to prevent the engine from maintaining the fuel pressure necessary for proper operation. Under normal circumstances, the repair would require specialized parts and several hours of labor, but Marcus had encountered similar problems often enough to know that a temporary fix was possible using materials available in his garage. "I can see what's wrong," Marcus said, straightening up and wiping rain from his eyes. "You've got a fuel line leak. The good news is that it's not a major engine problem. The bad news is that I don't have the specific replacement part in stock. And parts for a car like this aren't exactly available at the local auto parts store." Isabella's expression tightened with concern. "How long would it take to get the right part? For a Rolls Royce? Probably several days, maybe a week if we have to special order from the manufacturer." Marcus watched as Isabella processed this information, noting the way her jaw set with determination despite the obvious inconvenience. He found himself impressed by her composure, under circumstances that would have reduced many people to frustrated tears or angry demands for immediate solutions. "However," Marcus continued, "I might be able to rig a temporary repair that would get you back on the road tonight. It wouldn't be pretty, and you'd need to have it properly fixed as soon as possible, but it would get you where you need to go." Isabella's eyes brightened with hope. "You could do that?" "It would mean bringing the car back to my garage where I have better tools and lighting. And I should warn you that I've never worked on a Rolls Royce before. The principles are the same as any other car, but if something goes wrong—" "I trust you," Isabella interrupted, her voice carrying a conviction that surprised Marcus. "You didn't have to help me at all, especially in weather like this. The fact that you're willing to try means everything." The drive back to the garage required careful coordination. Isabella followed Marcus and Carlos in the Rolls Royce, limping along at low speed as the damaged fuel line struggled to deliver adequate fuel pressure. Several times, the engine seemed ready to quit entirely, but each time Isabella managed to coax it back to life with patient manipulation of the accelerator. Marcus found himself checking his rearview mirror constantly, worried that the luxury vehicle might leave its stranded owner on the side of the road, despite his confident assessment of the problem. When they finally reached the garage, Marcus felt a profound sense of relief. Getting the Rolls Royce safely off the highway and into a controlled environment meant that they could take their time diagnosing and addressing the problem without the added pressure of dangerous traffic and deteriorating weather conditions. The garage's fluorescent lights, harsh and unflattering under normal circumstances, seemed warm and welcoming as they illuminated the interior of the building and provided refuge from the storm. Carlos immediately began preparing the hydraulic lift while Marcus gathered the tools he would need for the temporary repair. Working on the Rolls Royce represented both an opportunity and a risk that he understood all too well. Success would demonstrate his competence and versatility as a mechanic, potentially opening doors to more lucrative work with high-end vehicles. Failure, on the other hand, could result in damage to a vehicle worth more than his garage, his equipment, and his apartment combined, creating financial liability that would destroy whatever remained of his carefully reconstructed life. Isabella seemed to sense his apprehension as he prepared to begin work. "You're worried about working on such an expensive car," she observed, her tone understanding rather than accusatory. Marcus paused in his preparation, considering how to respond honestly without appearing unprofessional. "I'd be lying if I said the thought hadn't crossed my mind. This car is worth more than everything I own put together. If I make a mistake—" "Then you make a mistake," Isabella replied with a shrug that seemed genuinely unconcerned. "Cars can be repaired or replaced. Your willingness to help someone in need, regardless of their circumstances or the value of their possessions, says something about your character that can't be bought or sold." Her words carried a weight that suggested personal experience with the difference between people who helped because they cared and people who helped because they expected something in return. Marcus found himself studying her face, noting the intelligence in her green eyes and the subtle lines of stress around them that spoke of responsibilities and pressures he could only imagine. The actual repair process took nearly 2 hours, complicated by the sophisticated engineering of the Rolls Royce and Marcus's determination to ensure that his temporary fix wouldn't cause additional problems down the road. Carlos proved invaluable as an assistant, holding lights and retrieving tools while asking intelligent questions about the unique features of the luxury vehicle's engine bay. Together, they managed to bypass the damaged fuel line using a combination of standard automotive parts and creative problem-solving that would have impressed the engineers who originally designed the system. As Marcus worked, Isabella proved to be an unusually engaged customer. Rather than waiting impatiently in the office or pacing around the garage, she asked thoughtful questions about the repair process and demonstrated a genuine curiosity about automotive mechanics that surprised him. Most customers, particularly those wealthy enough to afford Rolls Royces, treated their vehicles as appliances, concerned only with reliable operation rather than understanding the underlying systems that made that operation possible. "You really know what you're doing," Isabella observed as Marcus made the final adjustments to the temporary fuel line. "Have you always been interested in cars?" Marcus paused in his work, considering how much of his personal history to share with someone who was essentially a stranger, albeit a stranger who had spent the last 2 hours watching him work with an attention that suggested genuine interest rather than mere politeness. "My father was a mechanic," Marcus replied, returning his attention to the fuel line connections. "He owned a small garage in Texas, and I grew up thinking that fixing cars was the most important job in the world. Dad used to say that a good mechanic kept families together by making sure people could get to work, get to school, get to the hospital when they needed to." "What happened to your father's garage?" "He sold it when he retired, about 10 years ago. I was working for a dealership chain at the time, making good money, but feeling like just another cog in a corporate machine. After my wife died, I decided I wanted to try running my own place, give Sophia a chance to grow up in a business where people still mattered more than profit margins." Marcus realized he had shared more than he intended, but something about Isabella's presence made conversation feel natural rather than forced. She listened with the kind of attention that made people want to keep talking, as if their words carried weight and meaning rather than serving merely as background noise. "Sophia is your daughter?" "Yeah, she's 8. Smart as a whip and twice as stubborn as her old man." Marcus couldn't suppress a smile as he thought about Sophia's reaction to hearing about his work on a Rolls Royce. She would probably ask a dozen questions about the car, the customer, and whether working on expensive vehicles meant they could afford to go to the movies this weekend. It must be challenging, running a business and raising a daughter on your own. Marcus glanced up from his work, surprised by the empathy in Isabella's voice. "Some days are harder than others, but Sophia makes it worthwhile. Everything I do for her. This garage, working 16-hour days, living in a tiny apartment above a convenience store. It's all about building something better for her future." Isabella nodded with the understanding of someone who recognized the weight of responsibility and the lengths to which people would go to meet their obligations to those they loved. She's lucky to have a father who cares so much. "I'm the lucky one," Marcus replied, tightening the last connection on the improvised fuel line. "Ready to see if this works?" The moment of truth arrived as Isabella turned the key and the Rolls Royce's engine sprang to life with the smooth purr of perfectly tuned machinery. The repair held, the fuel pressure remained stable, and the various warning lights that had illuminated the dashboard during the breakdown remained dark. Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the fundamental pleasure of solving problems and helping people. "How much do I owe you?" Isabella asked as she turned off the engine and stepped out of the car. Marcus hesitated, knowing that his usual rates had no applicability to a situation like this. His standard labor charge would seem insulting given the value of the vehicle and the complexity of the repair. But charging what the work was actually worth would price him out of Isabella's reach, assuming she even carried that much cash. Don't worry about it, Marcus said finally. You were stranded in a storm. I couldn't charge someone for helping them out of a situation like that. Isabella's eyes widened with surprise. That's very generous, but this was clearly professional work. You spent hours diagnosing and repairing my car. I insist on paying you something. Really, it's fine. Consider it a neighbor helping a neighbor. Isabella studied Marcus for a long moment, her green eyes searching his face as if looking for some hidden motive or agenda. When she apparently found none, her expression softened into something that might have been wonder. When was the last time someone helped you? She asked quietly. The question caught Marcus off guard. He thought about the past 3 years, about the struggle to build the garage, the constant worry about money, the endless cycle of work and responsibility that left little time for anything resembling help or support. I don't really need help, Marcus replied automatically, though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. Isabella's smile was gentle but knowing. Everyone needs help sometimes. Even people who are strong enough to help others. Before Marcus could respond, Isabella reached into her purse and withdrew a business card. The paper was heavy, expensive, with raised lettering that felt substantial between Marcus's fingers. The name Montenegro Financial Services was printed in elegant script above an address in the city's financial district. I'd like you to have this, Isabella said. If you ever decide you might be interested in different opportunities, give me a call. Marcus glanced at the card, noting the prestigious address and the title listed beneath Isabella's name, Chief Executive Officer. The implications began to register slowly, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. Montenegro Financial Services was one of the largest banking institutions in the region, a company whose advertisements appeared on billboards and television commercials, whose corporate headquarters dominated several blocks of downtown real estate. Marcus began, then stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. Just someone whose car broke down on a rainy night. Isabella replied with a smile that suggested she was accustomed to this moment of recognition. Someone who was helped by a good man who didn't expect anything in return. As Isabella prepared to leave, Marcus found himself watching her with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. The woman who had stood in his garage for the past 2 hours, asking questions about fuel systems and demonstrating genuine interest in his work, controlled a financial empire that influenced the economic lives of thousands of people. Yet she had treated him with the kind of respect and consideration that suggested she saw him as an equal rather than a subordinate, as a person rather than a service provider. Isabella, Marcus called as she reached the driver's door of the way. Rolls Royce. Why didn't you tell me who you were? She paused, her hand resting on the door handle, and turned back to face him. Would it have changed anything? Would you have worked harder, been more careful, charged me more money? Marcus considered the question honestly. Probably. Then that's why I didn't tell you. I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I was just another stranded motorist. I wanted to know if your kindness was genuine or calculated. And? Isabella's smile was radiant in the harsh fluorescent light of the garage. It was genuine. That's rarer than you might think in my world. As the Rolls Royce disappeared into the night, its headlights cutting through the rain until they were swallowed by distance and darkness, Marcus stood in the doorway of his garage, holding Isabella's business card and wondering if the entire evening had been some kind of elaborate dream. Carlos, who had remained diplomatically silent during the final exchange, finally found his voice. "Dude," Carlos said, his tone hushed with awe. "Do you realize who that was?" Marcus looked at the business card again, reading the elegant script and impressive title. "Yeah, I think I'm starting to. Montenegro Financial Services basically owns half the city. That woman is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billions. And she just offered you a job." She didn't offer me a job, Marcus corrected, though he wasn't entirely sure what Isabella's parting words had meant. She gave me her business card. Same thing, man. Rich people don't hand out their personal contact information unless they're planning something. Marcus pocketed the card and began cleaning up the tools scattered around the work area. The garage needed to be ready for tomorrow's customers, and Sophia would be wondering why he was so late getting home. But as he went through the familiar motions of closing up shop, his mind kept returning to the conversation with Isabella, to the moment when she had asked when someone had last helped him, to the genuine warmth in her voice when she spoke about his kindness being rare in her world. The storm was beginning to pass by the time Marcus climbed the narrow stairs to the apartment he shared with Sophia. The rain had diminished to a steady drizzle, and the thunder had moved off toward the east, leaving behind the clean smell of washed air and the promise that tomorrow would bring clearer skies. Sophia had fallen asleep at the kitchen table, her head pillowed on her folded arms next to a plate of carefully prepared spaghetti that had long since grown cold. Marcus lifted his daughter gently, carrying her to her small bedroom and tucking her under the covers she had inherited from her mother. In sleep, Sophia looked even younger than her 8 years, her face peaceful and trusting in the way that reminded Marcus why he worked so hard to shield her from the harsh realities of their financial situation. She stirred slightly as he brushed a strand of dark hair from her forehead, murmuring something inaudible before settling back into deep sleep. In the quiet of his own bedroom, Marcus sat on the edge of the bed and examined Isabella's business card once more. The weight of the paper, the quality of the printing, the prestigious address, everything about it spoke of a world so far removed from his daily experience that it might as well have been another planet. Yet Isabella Montenegro, CEO of one of the most powerful financial institutions in the region, had spent 2 hours in his garage asking questions about fuel systems and expressing genuine appreciation for his willingness to help a stranger. Marcus placed the card on his nightstand and prepared for bed, but sleep proved elusive. His mind kept replaying the evening's events, searching for clues about Isabella's motivations and wondering whether her parting suggestion about different opportunities represented a genuine offer or merely the polite pleasantries of someone trying to end an awkward situation gracefully. In his experience, wealthy people often made casual remarks about staying in touch or exploring possibilities, statements that carried no real meaning beyond social courtesy. But something about Isabella had felt different. Her questions had been too detailed, her attention too focused, her final words too specific to dismiss as mere politeness. When she had asked about his willingness to consider different opportunities, her voice had carried the tone of someone making a genuine inquiry rather than offering empty encouragement. The rain continued to tap against the bedroom window as Marcus finally drifted toward sleep, Isabella's business card resting on the nightstand like a tangible reminder that sometimes, when you least expected it, helping others could change the trajectory of your entire life. In a few hours he would wake up to another day of brake jobs and oil changes, another day of stretching every dollar and worrying about Sophia's future, another day of the carefully controlled struggle that had defined his existence since Carmen's death. But for now, in the space between waking and sleeping, Marcus allowed himself to wonder what it might be like to work in a world where cars were art rather than transportation, where problems could be solved with resources rather than creativity, where a man's skills might be valued at their true worth rather than what the local market could bear. It was a dangerous kind of wondering, the sort that could lead to disappointment if pursued too seriously. But on this rain-soaked night, it felt like a luxury he could afford. The morning after the storm dawned crisp and clear, as if the universe had decided to wash away the previous night's chaos and present Marcus Rivera with a fresh slate. Sunlight streamed through the windows of Rivera's auto repair, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny celebrations of possibility. Marcus arrived at the garage earlier than usual, his mind still processing the surreal encounter with Isabella Montenegro and the business card that had spent the night on his nightstand like a talisman of potential change. Sophia had peppered him with questions over breakfast, her 8-year-old curiosity ignited by his explanation of why he had come home so late and wet the previous evening. Her eyes had grown wide when he mentioned the Rolls Royce, and she had immediately begun planning elaborate scenarios in which her father became the official mechanic for movie stars and millionaires. Marcus had gently redirected her enthusiasm toward more practical concerns, like finishing her cereal and gathering her school supplies. But privately, he found her excitement infectious and oddly comforting. Carlos arrived shortly after 8. His usual punctuality, accompanied by an unusual energy that suggested he had spent considerable time thinking about the previous night's events. The young man possessed an intuitive understanding of people that complemented his mechanical skills, and Marcus had learned to value his insights into both automotive problems and human nature. This morning, Carlos's attention seemed divided between the day's scheduled repairs and frequent glances toward the spot where the Rolls Royce had been parked. "You going to call her?" Carlos asked without preamble as he began organizing tools for their first job of the day. Marcus paused in his review of the work orders, momentarily confused by the question. "Call who?" "The banking lady, Montenegro. You going to call her about whatever opportunity she was talking about?" Marcus had been asking himself the same question since waking up, weighing the potential benefits against the likelihood of disappointment. In his experience, casual suggestions from wealthy people rarely translated into concrete opportunities, and he had learned to be skeptical of promises that seemed too good to be true. Yet something about Isabella's demeanor had suggested sincerity rather than mere politeness. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "What would I even say?" "Hi, you mentioned something about opportunities last night, and I was wondering if you had any jobs for a mechanic who's never worked on anything fancier than a 10-year-old pickup truck." Carlos set down his wrench and turned to face Marcus directly. "Look, man, I get that you're scared. After what happened with Carmen, after having to rebuild everything from scratch, it makes sense that you'd be cautious about trusting new people or taking big risks. But what if this is real? What if this woman actually sees something in you that could change everything?" The mention of Carmen sent a familiar pang through Marcus's chest. His wife had been the dreamer in their relationship, the one who encouraged him to take chances and believe in possibilities that seemed beyond reach. She had been the one who convinced him to leave the security of the dealership and pursue his goal of owning an independent garage. She had been the one who insisted that Marcus's skills and integrity would eventually attract the kind of success that couldn't be measured solely in financial terms. "Carmen would have told me to call," Marcus said quietly, more to himself than to Carlos. "Yeah, she would have. And she would have been right." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their first customer of the day, Mrs. Patterson, whose ancient Buick needed an oil change and a thorough inspection before her upcoming visit to her grandchildren in another state. Mrs. Patterson had been one of Marcus's first regular customers when he opened the garage, and her loyalty had helped sustain the business during its most difficult early months. She treated Marcus and Carlos like family members, always asking after Sophia and bringing homemade cookies that she claimed were too many for her to eat alone. As Marcus worked on the Buick, his hands following the familiar patterns of routine maintenance, his mind wandered to the question of what Isabella Montenegro might have meant by different opportunities. The banking industry seemed completely unrelated to automotive repair, but large corporations often required fleet maintenance services or specialized transportation arrangements. Perhaps Montenegro Financial Services needed someone to manage their corporate vehicles or provide emergency roadside assistance for executives. The morning progressed with its usual rhythm of diagnosis, repair, and customer interaction. Marcus found comfort in the predictable nature of the work, the way that mechanical problems could be solved through knowledge and persistence rather than luck or connections. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The night before, that the encounter with Isabella had opened a door to possibilities he hadn't previously considered. During the lunch break, while Carlos went to pick up sandwiches from the deli down the street, Marcus found himself staring at Isabella's business card with increasing frequency. The paper felt substantial between his fingers, the raised lettering speaking of quality and permanence in a way that suggested this wasn't someone who made casual gestures or empty promises. The address placed Montenegro Financial Services in the heart of the city's business district, a world of glass towers and expensive suits that felt as foreign to Marcus as another country. The afternoon brought a steady stream of customers, each presenting their own unique combination of automotive challenges and personal circumstances. Marcus worked with the focused intensity that had earned him a reputation for thorough, honest service, but part of his attention remained fixed on the business card and the decision it represented. By closing time, he had convinced himself that calling Isabella would be an exercise in futility, a waste of time that would only confirm what he already suspected about the gulf between her world and his. It was Sophia who finally tipped the balance. When Marcus arrived at their apartment that evening, he found his daughter working on a school project about careers and community helpers. She had chosen to write about mechanics, and her research had led her to discover that some automotive professionals worked on race cars, luxury vehicles, and even aircraft. Her excitement about these possibilities was infectious, and her casual assumption that her father could do anything he set his mind reminded Marcus of the dreams he had allowed to atrophy in the face of daily survival. "Daddy," Sophia said as they shared dinner at their small kitchen table, "do you think you could fix airplanes if you learned how?" Marcus smiled at the question, charmed by his daughter's belief in his capabilities. "Airplanes are pretty complicated, Mia. They require special training and certifications. But you could learn, right? You're really smart about engines and stuff." "I suppose I could, if I had the opportunity to study and practice." Sophia nodded with the certainty of someone who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved through effort and determination. "I think you could do anything if you really wanted to. You fixed that fancy car last night, and you'd never seen one before." Her words carried the simple wisdom of childhood, the kind of faith that adults often lost in the face of practical concerns and past disappointments. Marcus realized that his reluctance to call Isabella wasn't based on rational assessment of the situation, but on fear of rejection and the comfortable familiarity of limited expectations. That night, after Sophia had gone to bed, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with Isabella's business card and his cell phone. The card felt heavier somehow, weighted with possibility and the knowledge that making the call would represent a departure from the careful caution that had governed his decisions. Since Carmen's death, he thought about his wife's encouragement to pursue opportunities, even when they seemed beyond reach, about Sophia's unwavering belief in his abilities, about Carlos's observation that fear was keeping him from considering what might be real. Finally, before he could change his mind, Marcus dialed the number printed on the card. The phone rang twice before a professional female voice answered. "Montenegro Financial Services. This is Amanda. How may I direct your call?" Marcus felt a moment of panic as he realized he hadn't prepared what to say. "I'd like to speak with Isabella Montenegro, please. This is Marcus Rivera." "One moment, please." The brief hold music gave Marcus time to second-guess his decision and consider hanging up, but before he could act on his doubts, Isabella's voice came through the phone with warmth that seemed to bridge the gap between their different worlds. "Marcus, I was hoping you would call. How are you? How's your daughter?" The genuine pleasure in her voice surprised him and helped ease his nervousness. "We're both doing well, thank you." Sophia was fascinated by the story of the Rolls Royce. "She's been asking me about luxury cars all day." Isabella's laugh was musical and unguarded. "She sounds like a smart girl." Children often see possibilities that adults miss. Speaking of possibilities, Marcus said, deciding to address the purpose of his call directly, I've been thinking about what you said last night. About different opportunities. I'm not sure what you had in mind, but I'd be interested in hearing more. I'm glad you called, Isabella replied. I have a proposition that might interest you, but it's not something we can discuss properly. Over the phone. Would you be free for lunch tomorrow? There's a restaurant downtown called the Garden Terrace. It's quiet, and we could talk without interruption. Marcus felt a flutter of anxiety at the suggestion of meeting in what was undoubtedly an expensive restaurant in an upscale part of the city. His wardrobe consisted primarily of work clothes and a few casual pieces that would be woefully inadequate for the kind of establishment that someone like Isabella would frequent. I should mention, Isabella continued, as if sensing his hesitation, that this would be a business meeting, so please dress comfortably. I'm not trying to impress you with fancy surroundings. I just thought it would be easier to talk somewhere away from our respective workplaces. Her sensitivity to his potential discomfort impressed Marcus and helped confirm his growing sense that Isabella was someone who paid attention to other people's perspectives rather than assuming everyone shared her circumstances and comfort level. That sounds good, Marcus said. What time works for you? How about noon? I'll make a reservation under my name. After ending the call, Marcus sat in his quiet kitchen feeling as if he had just committed to something that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of his life. The lunch meeting represented far more than a simple conversation about employment opportunities. It was an acknowledgement that he was ready to consider possibilities beyond the careful boundaries he had constructed around his and Sophia's life. The next morning dawned gray and overcast with low clouds that seemed to press down on the city like a physical weight. Marcus arrived at the garage with an unusual combination of anticipation and nervousness that made it difficult to concentrate on routine tasks. Carlos noticed his distraction immediately and took over the more complex diagnostic work, while Marcus handled basic maintenance jobs that required less mental focus. You okay, boss? Carlos asked during a brief break between customers. You seem kind of scattered today. Marcus explained about the lunch meeting, watching as Carlos's expression shifted from curiosity to excitement to something approaching. Ah, she wants to meet you at the Garden Terrace? Carlos repeated. Dude, that place is where CEOs take each other when they're making million-dollar deals. You realize this isn't just some casual job offer, right? I don't know what it is, Marcus admitted. That's why I'm nervous. You should be excited, not nervous. This woman controls one of the biggest banks in the region, and she's taking time out of her schedule to have lunch with you personally. That doesn't happen unless she's serious about whatever she's planning. Carlos's enthusiasm was infectious, but it also added to Marcus's sense that he was venturing into territory where the rules and expectations were completely foreign to his experience. The automotive world had its own hierarchies and social codes, but they were based on demonstrable skills and practical knowledge. The business world that Isabella inhabited seemed to operate according to different principles entirely. At 11:30, Marcus left the garage in the hands of Carlos and drove toward downtown, his anxiety increasing with each mile that brought him closer to the financial district. The buildings grew taller and more imposing as he approached the city center, their glass and steel facades reflecting the gray sky in ways that made them seem almost otherworldly. The Garden Terrace occupied the ground floor of one of the newer high-rises, its entrance marked by understated elegance that spoke of clientele who didn't need flashy displays to confirm their importance. Marcus found a parking space several blocks away and walked through streets filled with people whose clothing and bearing marked them as members of a professional class he had observed from a distance but never joined. Their confident strides and expensive accessories created an atmosphere of purpose and success that made him acutely aware of his own outsider status. He had chosen his best jeans and a button-down shirt that Sophia had helped him iron that morning. But he still felt underdressed for the environment he was entering. The interior of the garden terrace was designed to impress without overwhelming, featuring natural materials and sophisticated lighting that created an atmosphere of quiet luxury. The hostess, a young woman whose professional demeanor couldn't quite hide her assessment of Marcus's appearance, asked for his name with the kind of polite inquiry that suggested she was accustomed to screening visitors who might not belong. "I'm meeting Isabella Montenegro," Marcus said, noting how the mention of Isabella's name immediately transformed the hostess's attitude from cautious politeness to deferential attention. "Of course, Mr. Rivera. Ms. Montenegro's already seated. Please follow me." Isabella occupied a corner table that provided privacy while offering a view of the restaurant's main dining room. She rose to greet Marcus with a warm smile that helped ease his nervousness about the formal setting. Her business attire was elegant but not ostentatious, and her manner suggested someone who was comfortable in these surroundings without being defined by them. "Thank you for coming," Isabella said as they settled into their seats. "I know this probably feels a bit overwhelming, but I wanted to meet somewhere we could talk without interruption." Marcus glanced around the dining room, noting the other patrons who were engaged in conversations that undoubtedly involved sums of money he could barely comprehend. "It's definitely different from my usual lunch spots." Isabella's laugh was genuine and unself-conscious. "I imagine it is. But I've discovered that important conversations happen wherever people are willing to be honest with each other, regardless of the setting." A server appeared to take their drink orders and explain the daily specials, his professional attentiveness including Marcus without any indication that he seemed out of place. Marcus found himself impressed by the staff's ability to make all patrons feel welcome, regardless of their apparent social or economic status. "Before we talk about business," Isabella said after the server departed, "tell me about Sophia. What does she want to be when she grows up?" The question surprised Marcus with its personal nature, but he found himself relaxing as he described his daughter's changing aspirations and boundless curiosity about the world. Isabella listened with the kind of attention that suggested genuine interest rather than polite conversation, asking follow-up questions that demonstrated she understood the challenges and joys of raising a child as a single parent. "She sounds remarkable," Isabella said when Marcus finished describing Sophia's latest school project. "Children who grow up watching their parents work hard and overcome obstacles often develop resilience and empathy that serve them well throughout their lives." "I hope so," Marcus replied. "Sometimes I worry that she's missing out on things because of our circumstances, but I try to make sure she knows how much she's loved and valued. Love and attention are worth more than material advantages," Isabella said with conviction that suggested personal experience. "Sophia is fortunate to have a father who understands that." The conversation shifted gradually toward business as their meals arrived. Isabella explained that Montenegro Financial Services was expanding its operations to include specialized lending for high-end automotive purchases and restoration projects. The bank needed someone with expertise in luxury vehicles to assess the value and condition of cars being used as collateral for loans, as well as to oversee restoration projects that the bank might finance. Traditional automotive appraisers understand the market value of standard vehicles, Isabella explained, but they often lack the hands-on experience necessary to evaluate truly exceptional cars or to manage complex restoration projects. "We need someone who can bridge that gap between theoretical knowledge and practical expertise." Marcus listened with growing interest as Isabella outlined the scope of the position she was describing. The work would involve traveling to evaluate vehicles, consulting with collectors and restoration specialists, and overseeing projects that could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was exactly the kind of challenging, varied work that he had dreamed about during his years of routine maintenance and basic repairs. "The position would require significant travel," Isabella continued, which might be challenging given your situation with Sophia, but we could structure it to minimize disruption to your family life, and the compensation would be substantial enough to provide real financial security. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as the implications of Isabella's offer began to register. The opportunity she was describing would not only solve his immediate financial concerns, but would also provide the kind of professional growth and recognition he had thought was beyond his reach. "Why me?" Marcus asked. "There must be hundreds of mechanics with more experience working on luxury vehicles." Isabella's expression became thoughtful, as if she were considering how much of her reasoning to reveal. "Experience with expensive cars isn't as important as understanding what makes them special. Last night, you didn't just fix my car's fuel system. You treated it with respect, asked intelligent questions about its design, and took the time to explain what you were doing and why. That combination of technical skill and genuine appreciation for automotive craftsmanship is rare. But surely, there are people with formal training in luxury vehicle restoration, people with certifications and established reputations in that field." "There are," Isabella agreed. "But most of them have never had to diagnose problems with limited tools in less than ideal conditions. They've never had to explain complex mechanical issues to customers who don't understand automotive terminology. They've never had to balance quality work with budget constraints or time pressures. Those skills are just as valuable as specialized knowledge, maybe more so." Marcus found himself impressed by Isabella's analysis of his qualifications, particularly her recognition of abilities he had developed out of necessity rather than formal training. The challenges she described were exactly the kinds of problems he solved daily in his current work, but applied to a completely different category of vehicles and clientele. "There's something else," Isabella added, her tone becoming more personal. "In my position, I meet a lot of people who are primarily motivated by money or status. It's refreshing to encounter someone who genuinely cares about doing good work and helping others, regardless of the immediate financial benefit. That kind of integrity is exactly what we need for this position." The lunch conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, covering details about the position, the company's expansion plans, and Marcus's concerns about maintaining his current commitments while taking on new responsibilities. Isabella demonstrated a thorough understanding of both the automotive industry and the practical challenges facing small business owners, suggesting solutions that addressed his worries about abandoning his existing customers and employees. "We could structure the arrangement so that you maintain ownership of your current garage while taking on consulting work for Montenegro Financial Services," Isabella explained. "Carlos could handle day-to-day operations when you're traveling, and you'd have the financial stability to hire additional help if needed. Your existing customers would still have access to your services, but you'd also have opportunities to work on projects that would expand your skills and reputation." The proposal was more generous and thoughtful than Marcus had dared to hope. Isabella had clearly given considerable thought to the practical implications of her offer, addressing concerns he hadn't even thought to raise. Her willingness to accommodate his existing responsibilities while providing opportunities for growth suggested someone who understood that good business relationships were built on mutual benefit rather than one-sided advantage. As their lunch meeting concluded, Isabella handed Marcus a folder containing detailed information about the position, sample projects, and compensation structure. The numbers alone were enough to transform Sophia's future prospects, providing resources for quality education, healthcare, and opportunities that had seemed impossibly distant just 24 hours earlier. "Take your time reviewing everything," Isabella said as they prepared to leave. "This is a big decision, and I want you to be completely comfortable with what we're proposing. If you have questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to call." Marcus accepted the folder with hands that trembled slightly, whether from excitement or nervousness he couldn't quite determine. "How long do I have to decide?" "There's no artificial deadline," Isabella replied. We want the right person for this position, not just someone who can start immediately. Take whatever time you need to discuss this with Sophia, to think about the implications for your current business, to make sure this is what you really want. The drive back to the garage passed in a blur of processing and speculation. Marcus found himself alternately excited by the possibilities Isabella had outlined and terrified by the magnitude of the changes those possibilities would require. The folder sat on the passenger seat like a tangible representation of a future he had never allowed himself to imagine, filled with opportunities that seemed almost too good to be real. Carlos was waiting when Marcus returned to the garage, his expression eager for details about the meeting. Marcus described the conversation and the job offer while Carlos listened with increasing amazement, occasionally interrupting with questions or expressions of disbelief at the scope of what Isabella was proposing. So basically, Carlos said when Marcus finished his explanation, she wants to pay you a fortune to travel around the country working on the most amazing cars ever built. And you're worried about whether it's a good idea? When you put it like that, it sounds pretty obvious, Marcus admitted. But there are a lot of factors to consider. Sophia's school, your job here, our regular customers who depend on us. I can't just abandon everything I've built for an opportunity that might not work out. Carlos was quiet for a moment, then walked to the office and returned with a stack of overdue invoices and past due notices that Marcus tried to keep hidden from view. Look, man, I get that you're scared of change, but this place is barely keeping you afloat. You work 16-hour days and still worry about making rent. Sophia deserves better, and so do you. The harsh reality of their financial situation, laid out in the form of unpaid bills and increasingly urgent notices, provided sobering context for Isabella's offer. Marcus had become so accustomed to the constant stress of financial uncertainty that he had almost forgotten what security might feel like. The opportunity Isabella presented wasn't just about professional advancement or interesting work. It was about providing Sophia with the kind of stability and opportunity that every parent wanted for their child. That evening, Marcus sat with Sophia at their kitchen table, the folder from Isabella spread between them as he attempted to explain the opportunity in terms an 8-year-old could understand. Sophia's eyes grew wide as he described traveling to different cities, working on cars that cost more than houses, and earning enough money to provide real security for their future. Would we have to move? Sophia asked, her voice small with concern. Not necessarily, Marcus replied. I might have to travel sometimes for work, but this would still be our home. And if I did take this job, we could afford a better apartment, maybe even a house with a yard. Sophia considered this information with the seriousness of someone weighing important decisions. Would Carlos still work for you? Yes, he'd take care of the garage when I'm away. And we might be able to hire other people to help him. Would you be happier? Sophia asked, her question cutting straight to the heart of Marcus's uncertainty. Marcus looked at his daughter's earnest face and realized that she had identified the core issue he had been avoiding. The question wasn't whether Isabella's offer was financially attractive or professionally interesting. The question was whether pursuing this opportunity would lead to the kind of life he wanted to build for himself and Sophia. I think I would be, Marcus said honestly. I'd be doing work that challenges me, using skills I've developed, and providing better opportunities for you. But I'm also scared because it's such a big change from what we're used to. Sophia nodded with understanding beyond her years. Mama always said that the best things in life come when you're brave enough to try something new. Her words, carrying the echo of Carmen's voice and wisdom, provided the clarity Marcus had been seeking. His wife had never been content with settling for less than what was possible, never satisfied with accepting limitations that could be overcome through effort and courage. She would have seen Isabella's offer as confirmation that patience and integrity eventually attracted the recognition they deserved. You're right, Mia, Marcus said. pulling Sophia into a hug that conveyed both gratitude and determination. Sometimes being brave means taking chances on good things, even when we don't know exactly how they'll turn out. The next morning, Marcus called Isabella's office and accepted her offer, setting in motion a series of changes that would transform not only his professional life, but his understanding of what was possible when talent met opportunity. The transition wouldn't be simple or immediate, but for the first time since Carmen's death, Marcus felt as if he was moving toward something better rather than simply trying to maintain what he had. Within a week, the arrangements Isabella had outlined began to take concrete form. Montenegro Financial Services provided consulting contracts that allowed Marcus to maintain ownership of his garage while taking on specialized work for the bank. Carlos was promoted to manager with a significant salary increase, and they hired 2 additional mechanics to handle the increased workload. The changes brought new energy to the small garage, transforming it from a struggling business into a thriving operation that served both local customers and high-end clients. Marcus's first assignment involved evaluating a collection of vintage Ferrari sports cars being offered as collateral for a substantial loan. The owner, a wealthy collector who had fallen on hard times, needed to liquidate part of his collection while retaining ownership of his most prized vehicles. Marcus's job was to assess the condition and authenticity of each car, ensuring that Montenegro Financial Services understood exactly what they were accepting as security. The collection was housed in a climate-controlled warehouse that felt more like a museum than a storage facility. Each vehicle was positioned to show its best angles, with lighting that emphasized the curves and details that made these machines works of art as much as transportation. Marcus walked through the space with growing appreciation for the craftsmanship and engineering that had created these automotive masterpieces. The Ferrari 250 GTO that anchored the collection was particularly stunning, its red paint seeming to glow with an inner fire that spoke of countless hours of careful restoration. As Marcus examined the engine bay, he found himself thinking about the journey that had brought him to this moment. From fixing fuel lines in a converted gas station to evaluating million-dollar classics in a warehouse that cost more to maintain than most people earned in a year. Isabella had accompanied him on this first assignment, partly to observe his evaluation process and partly to introduce him to the collector who would be their client. She watched with obvious satisfaction as Marcus conducted his assessment with the same thorough attention to detail he had demonstrated on her Rolls Royce, asking informed questions and providing insights that demonstrated both technical knowledge and genuine appreciation for the vehicles. "What's your assessment?" Isabella asked as Marcus completed his examination of the final car in the collection. "These are exceptional vehicles," Marcus replied. "The restoration work is museum quality, and the documentation appears authentic. From a collateral perspective, they represent solid value with strong market appreciation potential." The collector, an elderly gentleman named Frederick Whitmore, had been observing Marcus's work with the careful attention of someone whose livelihood depended on accurate evaluation of his possessions. When Marcus delivered his assessment, Whitmore's expression shifted from cautious anxiety to visible relief. "Thank you," Whitmore said, extending his hand to Marcus. "I was worried about working with someone who might not understand what makes these cars special. It's clear that you appreciate both their mechanical significance and their emotional value." The successful completion of his first assignment marked the beginning of a new phase in Marcus's career. Over the following months, he traveled to evaluate collections, oversee restoration projects, and provide expertise that helped Montenegro Financial Services establish itself as a leader in luxury automotive lending. Each assignment brought new challenges and opportunities to expand his knowledge while building relationships with collectors, restorers, and automotive experts from around the country. The work was everything Isabella had promised and more. Marcus found himself consulting on projects that ranged from authenticating pre-war classics to overseeing the restoration of race cars with significant historical importance. The technical challenges pushed him to expand his skills and knowledge, while the travel exposed him to automotive cultures and communities he had never known existed. More importantly, the financial security the position provided allowed Marcus to focus on quality rather than quantity, to take pride in his work without constantly worrying about immediate survival. Sophia thrived in their new circumstances, her natural confidence bolstered by the knowledge that her father's talents were recognized and valued. She began talking about college and careers with the assumption that opportunities would be available to her, a perspective that represented a fundamental shift from the careful limitations that had previously governed their planning. The relationship between Marcus and Isabella evolved gradually from professional collaboration to something more personal and complex. Their work required frequent communication and coordination, leading to conversations that ranged beyond immediate business concerns to include perspectives on life, family, and the balance between ambition and contentment. Marcus found himself looking forward to these exchanges with an anticipation that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with Isabella's intelligence, humor, and genuine interest in his thoughts and experiences. Isabella, for her part, seemed to appreciate Marcus's grounded perspective and his ability to see through the pretensions and complications that often surrounded wealth and success. Their different backgrounds and experiences created a dynamic that challenged both of them to consider perspectives they might not have encountered otherwise, leading to insights that enriched both their professional and personal lives. Yet even as Marcus settled into his new role and began to envision a future that included continued growth and success, he remained unaware of the forces that were already aligning against him. In the exclusive clubs and private dining rooms where Isabella's business was discussed, her decision to promote an unknown mechanic to a position of influence had not gone unnoticed. Some viewed it as an eccentric indulgence that would eventually prove costly, while others saw it as evidence of poor judgment that called into question her broader decision-making abilities. Among those watching Marcus's rapid ascent with particular interest was Victoria Sterling, Isabella's predecessor as CEO of Montenegro Financial Services, and the woman whose retirement had created the opportunity for Isabella to assume control of the company. Victoria maintained significant influence within the financial community and had never completely reconciled herself to being replaced by someone she viewed as inexperienced and overly idealistic. Victoria's concerns about Isabella's leadership had been largely theoretical until the promotion of Marcus Rivera provided concrete evidence of what she viewed as questionable judgment. A mechanic from a working-class neighborhood, regardless of his apparent skills, had no business influencing decisions that involved millions of dollars and relationships with some of the city's most influential families. The situation represented both an opportunity to demonstrate Isabella's unfitness for leadership and a potential vulnerability that could be exploited to undermine her position. As Marcus continued to build his reputation and expand his influence within Montenegro Financial Services, he remained focused on the immediate challenges of mastering his new responsibilities and providing for Sophia's future. He was unaware that his success was being monitored by people who saw it as evidence of Isabella's weakness rather than confirmation of her vision. The storm that would soon engulf both of them was gathering strength in conference rooms and private conversations, where Marcus's name was spoken with skepticism and Isabella's judgment was questioned with increasing frequency. The world that had seemed to offer unlimited possibilities was about to reveal the hidden costs of ambition and the price that successful people sometimes paid for challenging established expectations. But for now, Marcus continued to work with the enthusiasm of someone who had discovered that talent and integrity could indeed be rewarded, unaware that others were working to ensure that his meteoric rise would be followed by an equally dramatic fall. The first sign that Marcus Rivera's newfound success had attracted unwanted attention came on a Wednesday morning in November, delivered in the form of an elegantly printed invitation that arrived at Montenegro Financial Services, addressed specifically. To him, the heavy cardstock bore the embossed logo of the Metropolitan Automotive Society, an exclusive organization that Marcus had never heard of, but which apparently knew enough about him to extend an invitation to their annual Collectors Gala. Marcus studied the invitation with growing puzzlement as he sat in his new office on the 15th floor of Montenegro Financial Services headquarters. The space still felt surreal to him, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city's financial district and furniture that probably cost more than he used to make in 6 months. The invitation's formal language spoke of an evening celebrating automotive excellence and recognizing outstanding contributions to the collector community, but something about the timing and specificity felt calculated rather than coincidental. Isabella knocked softly on his office door before entering, her expression immediately shifting to concern when she saw the invitation in his hands. She had developed an ability to read his moods and reactions that sometimes surprised him with its accuracy, as if their professional partnership had created an intuitive understanding that went beyond normal business relationships. "Everything okay?" she asked, settling into one of the leather chairs across from his desk with the fluid grace that characterized all her movements. Marcus handed her the invitation, watching as her green eyes scanned the formal text and her expression grew increasingly serious. When she finished reading, she set the invitation on his desk with deliberate care, as if it might explode if handled roughly. "The Metropolitan Automotive Society," Isabella said, her voice carrying a note of warning that Marcus didn't immediately understand. "That's Victoria Sterling's organization." The name meant nothing to Marcus, but Isabella's tone suggested. "It should. Victoria Sterling? My predecessor as CEO of Montenegro Financial Services. She retired 18 months ago, supposedly to pursue other interests, but she's maintained significant influence in financial and social circles throughout the city." Isabella's fingers drummed against the arm of her chair, a rare display of nervous energy that suggested the invitation represented more than a simple social gathering. "Should I be concerned about an invitation to an automotive event?" Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. Isabella was quiet for a moment, apparently weighing how much to reveal about the political undercurrents that Marcus was only beginning to understand. When she spoke, her voice carried the careful tone of someone explaining dangerous territory to a newcomer. "Victoria has never been entirely comfortable with the changes I've implemented since taking over the company. She believes in traditional approaches to banking, traditional client relationships, traditional ways of conducting business. Your promotion represents everything she finds problematic about my leadership style." Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same sensation he had experienced during his most difficult financial struggles, when it seemed like every solution created new problems. "So this invitation is really about undermining you through me, possibly. Or it could be innocent interest in your expertise. Victoria does collect vintage automobiles, and she might genuinely want to meet someone who's been making waves in automotive consulting circles." Isabella's attempt at optimism didn't quite convince either of them. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of David Chun, Montenegro Financial Services head of public relations, whose typically calm demeanor seemed strained as he entered Marcus's office without his usual preliminary knock. David was one of the few people at the company who had made Marcus feel immediately welcome, offering practical advice about navigating corporate culture without condescension or judgment. "We have a problem," David announced, placing a tablet on Marcus's desk with the screen displaying the website of Financial Industry Weekly, a trade publication that wielded considerable influence within banking circles. The headline read, "Montenegro Financial Gambles on Unproven Talent," above an article that dissected Marcus's hiring with the kind of detailed analysis typically reserved from major policy decisions or executive scandals. The piece questioned Isabella's judgment in promoting someone with no traditional financial industry experience to a position of significant responsibility, suggesting that personal rather than professional considerations might have influenced her decision. Marcus read the article with growing dismay, noting how his background was presented as evidence of poor qualification rather than diverse experience. His work at Rivera's auto repair was characterized as small-time mechanical services in a working-class neighborhood, while his recent successes were attributed to nepotistic advancement rather than proven expertise. The article concluded with speculation about whether Montenegro Financial Services could maintain its reputation for conservative risk management while employing unconventional personnel in positions of trust. How did they get such detailed information about my background? Marcus asked, though he suspected the answer would not be reassuring. David's expression was grim. Someone provided them with extensive research, including financial records from your garage, details about your personal circumstances, and quotes from anonymous sources within the automotive appraisal community. This wasn't casual journalism. Someone invested significant time and resources in building this story. Isabella's jaw tightened as she continued reading the article on her own device. The timing isn't coincidental. This article was published the same day you received the invitation to Victoria's gala. She's making a statement about her opinion of our business practices. Marcus felt the weight of unwanted scrutiny settling over him like a heavy coat. In his previous life, his reputation had been built through direct relationships with customers who knew his work firsthand. The idea that strangers could influence his professional standing through anonymous accusations and selective presentation of facts represented a type of vulnerability he had never experienced. "What do we do?" Marcus asked, looking between Isabella and David for guidance in navigating waters that felt completely foreign to his experience. David was already formulating a response strategy. We could issue a statement defending the hiring decision and highlighting Marcus's qualifications and early successes. We could arrange interviews where Marcus demonstrates his expertise. We could provide documentation of the value he's already brought to the company. Or, Isabella said quietly, we could ignore it and let Marcus's work speak for itself. The room fell silent as the implications of both approaches became clear. Responding defensively might legitimize the criticism by acknowledging it deserved a response, but ignoring the attacks could allow them to gain momentum and influence. Opinion before the truth could be established. Marcus found himself thinking about Sophia, about the conversation they had shared regarding bravery and taking chances on good things. His daughter's perspective suddenly seemed more relevant than the political calculations being discussed around him. "I want to attend the gala," Marcus said, surprising both Isabella and David with the firmness of his decision. Isabella's eyes widened. "Marcus, that could be walking into an ambush. Victoria knows how to manipulate social situations to her advantage. And you'd be entering her territory surrounded by people who might already be predisposed to question your credentials." "Maybe," Marcus replied, "but running from confrontation isn't going to make the questions go away. If people want to judge my qualifications, they should at least meet me before deciding I don't belong." David nodded slowly, apparently seeing strategic value in Marcus's instinct. It could work in our favor if Marcus handles himself well. Direct personal interaction often trumps negative publicity, especially when the publicity seems motivated by personal rather than professional concerns. Isabella remained skeptical, but Marcus could see her weighing the potential benefits against the obvious risks. Her protective instincts seemed to be warring with her recognition that Marcus needed to establish his own credibility rather than relying on her endorsement indefinitely. "If you're determined to do this," Isabella said finally, "we need to prepare thoroughly. Victoria's events are elaborate affairs with specific social protocols. The attendees will include some of the most influential people in automotive collecting, and they'll be watching to see how you handle yourself. Over the next week, Isabella and David provided Marcus with an intensive education in the social dynamics he would encounter at the gala. They explained the relationships between different collectors, the unspoken hierarchies that governed automotive society, and the subtle ways that acceptance or rejection could be communicated without direct confrontation. Marcus found the preparation process both fascinating and exhausting. The world of high-end collecting operated according to rules that seemed designed to exclude anyone who hadn't been born into wealth or educated in the proper protocols. Yet he also recognized that understanding these dynamics was essential to succeeding in his new role, regardless of his personal feelings about their fairness or necessity. Sophia listened to his explanations of the upcoming event with the intense curiosity she brought to all of her father's work adventures. Her questions often cut to the heart of issues that the adults were approaching with unnecessary complexity. "So these people don't think you're smart enough to do your job?" Sophia asked one evening as Marcus practiced introducing himself in ways that might impress the gala attendees. "Something like that," Marcus replied. "They think I don't have the right kind of education or experience." Sophia considered this with the seriousness she brought to all matters of fairness and justice. "But you fixed that fancy lady's car when nobody else could, right? And now you help the bank make good decisions about expensive cars?" "Yes, that's right." "Then they're just being mean because they don't like that you're better at your job than they thought you'd be." Her 8-year-old perspective provided clarity that cut through the political complications and personal anxieties surrounding the situation. Marcus realized that his daughter's assessment was probably more accurate than the sophisticated analyses being offered by his professional advisors. The evening of the gala arrived with unseasonable warmth that seemed to mock Marcus's nervous energy. He had invested in formal wear appropriate for the occasion, a decision that required careful budgeting despite his improved financial circumstances. The tuxedo felt foreign against his skin, transforming him into someone who looked like he belonged at elegant social events, but felt like an actor playing an unfamiliar role. Isabella offered to accompany him to the gala, but Marcus declined, recognizing that her presence might undermine his goal of establishing independent credibility. If the automotive community was going to accept him, it needed to be based on his own merits rather than his association with Isabella's authority and influence. The Metropolitan Automotive Society's annual gala was held at the Museum of Transportation, a venue that provided an appropriate backdrop for celebrating automotive excellence. The museum's collection of vintage cars, aircraft, and maritime vessels created an atmosphere of technological achievement that reminded attendees of humanity's ongoing relationship with elegant machinery. Marcus arrived to find the museum transformed into an elaborate party venue, with dramatic lighting that emphasized the curves and details of the displayed vehicles while creating intimate conversation areas throughout the space. The attendees moved through the environment with the confident ease of people accustomed to exclusive events, their expensive clothing and practiced social skills, marking them as members of a community that Marcus was still learning to navigate. Victoria Sterling was immediately recognizable from the photographs Marcus had studied during his preparation. She was a woman in her early 60s who carried herself with the assured authority of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Her silver hair was styled in a way that spoke of professional expertise, and her jewelry was chosen to complement rather than compete with her overall presentation. She approached Marcus within minutes of his arrival, flanked by several other collectors whose names Marcus recognized from Isabella's briefings. The encounter felt choreographed, as if Victoria had been waiting for his entrance to initiate a conversation that had been planned well in advance. "Mr. Rivera," Victoria said, extending a hand with the kind of smile that managed to be both welcoming and somehow predatory. "I'm so pleased you could join us this evening." I've been hearing fascinating things about your work with Montenegro. Financial services. Marcus accepted her handshake, noting the firmness of her grip and the calculating intelligence in her eyes. Thank you for the invitation, Ms. Sterling. This is an impressive event. We do try to maintain certain standards, Victoria replied, her tone suggesting that maintaining standards was a constant challenge in a world that seemed determined to lower them. I understand you've been making quite an impact in automotive consulting despite your unconventional background. The conversation that followed felt like a polite interrogation, with Victoria and her associates asking questions that seemed designed to expose the limitations of Marcus's formal education and traditional credentials. They inquired about his training in automotive history, his familiarity with European restoration techniques, and his understanding of market dynamics in international collector car auctions. Marcus answered honestly, acknowledging gaps in his knowledge while emphasizing the practical experience and problem-solving skills he brought to his work. He found that his directness seemed to disarm some of his questioners who appeared to have expected defensive responses or attempts to inflate his qualifications. The evening's program included a presentation about recent trends in automotive collecting, delivered by a renowned expert whose analysis focused on the increasing importance of authenticity and provenance in determining vehicle values. Marcus listened with genuine interest, taking mental notes about market factors that could influence his future consulting work. During the presentation, he became aware that several attendees were watching him rather than the speaker, apparently more interested in observing his reactions than in learning about collector car trends. The scrutiny was unsettling but also enlightening, providing insight into the political dynamics that surrounded his position at Montenegro Financial Services. The formal program concluded with an auction of automotive memorabilia, with proceeds benefiting the museum's educational programs. Marcus participated modestly, bidding successfully on a vintage repair manual that would be useful in his work while demonstrating his genuine interest in automotive history rather than simply social climbing. As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself engaged in increasingly substantive conversations with collectors who seemed genuinely curious about his perspective on automotive restoration and valuation. His practical experience provided insights that complemented their theoretical knowledge, leading to discussions that felt more like professional consultations than social small talk. One particularly engaging conversation involved a dispute over the authenticity of a Ferrari 275 GTB that was being offered for sale by a prominent dealer. The collector who brought up the case had noticed details that seemed inconsistent with original factory specifications, but he lacked the technical expertise to evaluate whether the discrepancies represented original variation, legitimate restoration choices, or fraudulent modification. Marcus listened to the description of the questionable elements and found himself mentally cataloging the diagnostic steps he would use to resolve the authentication questions. His questions about the car's history and current condition demonstrated a systematic approach to automotive investigation that impressed the other participants in the conversation. "You should examine that vehicle," suggested Harold Pemberton, a collector whose warehouse of vintage Jaguars had made him a respected voice in automotive authentication. "Your perspective might settle the question once and for all." The suggestion was taken up by others in the group, leading to an impromptu consultation session that felt more natural and comfortable than any of the earlier social interactions. Marcus found himself discussing technical details with people who shared his passion for automotive excellence, regardless of their different backgrounds and economic circumstances. Victoria Sterling observed these conversations from across the room, her expression unreadable as she watched Marcus integrate himself into the collector community through expertise rather than social connections. When she finally approached him again, late in the evening, her manner seemed less aggressive and more genuinely curious. "You've made quite an impression tonight," Victoria observed, her tone neutral enough that Marcus couldn't determine whether she intended the comment as praise or criticism. "I hope so," Marcus replied. "I'm genuinely interested in this community and the work you all do to preserve automotive history." Victoria studied him for a moment, apparently reassessing her initial impressions. Isabella Montenegro is known for making unconventional decisions. Some of them have worked out better than others. Marcus recognized the comment as both a warning and an opportunity to demonstrate his understanding of the political landscape surrounding his position. "I can only control my own performance," he replied. "Isabella's judgment will be proven, right or wrong, based on the results I deliver." "Indeed," Victoria said, her slight smile suggesting either approval or amusement at his diplomatic response. "Results do have a way of clarifying things that seem uncertain at first." As the gala concluded and attendees began to depart, Marcus found himself surrounded by people exchanging business cards and discussing potential collaborations. Several collectors expressed interest in consulting with him about specific vehicles in their collections, while others invited him to upcoming events and private viewings. The evening that had begun as a potential confrontation had evolved into something closer to a professional networking opportunity. Marcus realized that his fears about the event had been based on incomplete understanding of the collector community's priorities and values. While social credentials certainly mattered in these circles, expertise and genuine passion for automotive excellence carried significant weight as well. The drive back to his apartment provided time for reflection on the evening's events and their implications for his future at Montenegro Financial Services. The attacks in Financial Industry Weekly had created a test that he seemed to have passed, at least partially, by demonstrating that his qualifications extended beyond Isabella's endorsement to include recognition from the broader collector community. Yet Marcus also understood that one successful evening didn't eliminate the challenges he would continue to face. Victoria Sterling and others who questioned Isabella's leadership would undoubtedly continue looking for evidence that unconventional personnel decisions represented broader problems with Montenegro Financial Services management and strategy. The following morning brought new evidence of the continuing scrutiny surrounding Marcus's position. David Chun arrived at the office with a folder containing clippings from various industry publications, each offering different perspectives on the previous evening's gala and Marcus's participation in the event. The coverage ranged from neutral reporting about the evening's activities to more pointed analysis of Marcus's reception by the collector community. Financial Industry Weekly, the publication that had initiated the criticism, published a follow-up piece acknowledging that Marcus had exceeded expectations at the gala while maintaining that his long-term success remained an open question requiring continued evaluation. More encouraging was coverage in Collector Car Weekly, a publication that focused specifically on automotive enthusiasts rather than financial industry concerns. Their reporter had attended the gala and observed Marcus's interactions with collectors, noting that his practical expertise and genuine enthusiasm for automotive history impressed attendees who had initially questioned his credentials. Isabella read through the coverage with obvious relief, though Marcus could see that she remained concerned about the ongoing attention surrounding his position. The positive reception at the gala had diffused some of the immediate criticism, but it had also elevated his profile in ways that would bring additional scrutiny to his future work. "This is good news," Isabella said as she finished reviewing the articles. "But we need to be prepared for continued attention. Success often attracts as much criticism as failure, especially when it challenges people's assumptions about how things should work." Marcus nodded, understanding that his position at Montenegro Financial Services had made him a symbol in broader debates about merit versus tradition, innovation versus established practice, and the role of formal credentials in determining professional competence. The responsibility felt heavier than he had anticipated, but also more meaningful than he had initially realized. The weeks following the gala brought a series of high-profile consulting assignments that tested Marcus's abilities. while providing opportunities to further establish his reputation within the collector community. Each successful project generated additional referrals and increased confidence in his expertise, creating a momentum that seemed to validate Isabella's original decision to hire him. Yet even as Marcus's professional standing improved, he remained aware of the underlying tensions that his success had exposed within Montenegro, financial services, and the broader financial community. Victoria Sterling's influence extended far beyond automotive collecting, and her concerns about Isabella's leadership represented more than personal disagreement about personnel decisions. The situation came to a head during a board meeting in December, when several members questioned whether Montenegro Financial Services' expansion into specialty automotive lending represented a prudent use of company resources or an expensive indulgence that distracted from core banking services. The discussion, which Isabella later described to Marcus, had focused as much on the symbolism of hiring him as on the financial performance of their automotive lending division. "They're not really questioning the profitability of automotive lending," Isabella explained during one of their regular strategy sessions. "They're questioning whether I understand the importance of maintaining Montenegro Financial Services' traditional image and client relationships." Marcus found himself caught between gratitude for Isabella's continued support and concern that his presence was creating problems for her leadership of the company. The success he had achieved in his consulting work felt hollow if it came at the cost of Isabella's professional standing or Montenegro Financial Services stability. "Maybe I should consider other opportunities," Marcus suggested, though the words felt like betrayal even as he spoke them. "If my presence here is creating political problems for you, it might be better for everyone if I found another position." Isabella's response was immediate and emphatic. "Absolutely not." Backing down from criticism would send exactly the wrong message to the board and to Victoria's supporters. "Besides, your work has been outstanding, and Montenegro Financial Services is stronger because of your contributions." The conversation was interrupted by David Shun's arrival with news that would reshape the dynamic surrounding Marcus's position in ways none of them had anticipated. David's expression combined excitement with apprehension as he placed a formal document on Isabella's desk. "We've received an invitation to participate in the Monterey Classic car auction," David announced. "They want Montenegro Financial Services to provide authentication and valuation services for their spring sale, with Marcus serving as lead consultant." The Monterey Classic car auction was among the most prestigious automotive events in the world, attracting collectors, dealers, and automotive enthusiasts from around the globe. The vehicles offered for sale represented the pinnacle of automotive achievement, with individual cars often selling for millions of dollars. Being selected to provide authentication services was both an enormous professional opportunity and a highly visible test of Montenegro Financial Services' expertise in the luxury automotive market. Isabella's eyes lit up with recognition of the opportunity's significance. "This could establish us as the definitive authority in automotive finance and authentication. The exposure alone would be worth millions in advertising." Marcus felt a familiar combination of excitement and anxiety as he considered the implications of such a high-profile assignment. The opportunity to work with some of the world's most significant automobiles was exactly the kind of professional challenge he had dreamed about during his years of routine maintenance work. Yet he also understood that any mistakes or controversies at such a visible event would be magnified by the international attention surrounding the auction. "There's something else," David continued, his tone suggesting that the additional information might be less welcome than the initial opportunity. "Victoria Sterling sits on the auction's board of directors. She was involved in the decision to invite Montenegro Financial Services to participate." The revelation added new complexity to what had initially seemed like straightforward professional recognition. Victoria's involvement suggested that the invitation might represent another test of Marcus's capabilities rather than simple acknowledgement of his expertise. The high-profile nature of the event would amplify both success and failure, creating stakes that extended far beyond the specific vehicles being evaluated. Isabella was quiet for several moments, apparently weighing the opportunities against the risks of accepting such a visible assignment. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the determination that Marcus had come to associate with her most important decisions. "We're going to accept," Isabella declared. "This is exactly the kind of opportunity that Montenegro Financial Services was created to pursue. If Victoria wants to test our capabilities on an international stage, we'll show her what expertise combined with innovation can accomplish." As the meeting concluded and plans began to take shape for their participation in the Monterey auction, Marcus found himself thinking about the journey that had brought him to this moment. Less than a year earlier, he had been struggling to keep a small garage operating while providing for Sophia's basic needs. Now he was preparing to represent one of the region's most prestigious financial institutions at an international automotive event that would be watched by collectors and experts around the world. The transformation felt both miraculous and terrifying, a reminder that success often brought challenges that were just as daunting as the struggles that preceded it. Yet Marcus also felt a growing confidence in his abilities and judgment, earned through months of proving himself in increasingly demanding situations. The opposition that had emerged to challenge his rapid advancement had forced him to develop skills and perspectives that extended far beyond mechanical expertise. He had learned to navigate corporate politics, social hierarchies, and professional relationships that would have seemed impossibly complex during his days of fixing brake lines and changing oil. Most importantly, he had discovered that his unconventional background was not a limitation to be overcome, but a strength to be leveraged. The practical problem-solving skills he had developed through years of automotive repair work translated directly to the challenges of authentication and valuation in the luxury car market. His ability to communicate complex technical concepts to customers with varying levels of mechanical knowledge proved invaluable when working with collectors who needed to understand the significance of restoration decisions or authenticity questions. As winter settled over the city and preparations for the Monterey auction intensified, Marcus understood that the coming months would determine not only his own professional future, but also the viability of Isabella's vision for Montenegro Financial Services as an innovative force in luxury automotive finance. The stakes had never been higher, but neither had the potential rewards for proving that expertise and integrity could triumph over tradition and prejudice. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test everything Marcus had learned about both automotive excellence and the complex world of high-stakes business relationships. Victory would establish him as a legitimate authority in automotive consulting while validating Isabella's judgment and leadership. Failure would provide Victoria Sterling and other critics with the evidence they needed to argue that Montenegro Financial Services had lost its way under Isabella's guidance. But failure was not an option Marcus was prepared to consider. Too much had been invested, too many opportunities created, and too many people were counting on his success for him to allow fear or self-doubt to undermine the momentum they had built together. The morning of the Monterey Classic Car Auction arrived with California sunshine that painted the Pebble Beach coastline in shades of gold and azure. Marcus Rivera stood on the balcony of his hotel room, watching early morning joggers navigate the famous golf course while luxury automobiles began arriving for the weekend's festivities. In his hands, he held a thick folder containing authentication reports for 12 vehicles that would represent Montenegro Financial Services' credibility on an international stage. 3 months of intensive preparation had led to this moment. Marcus had personally inspected each consigned vehicle, conducting forensic examinations that ranged from paint analysis to engine documentation. His reports would determine whether multi-million-dollar transactions proceeded, smoothly or ground to a halt amid questions of authenticity and provenance. Isabella emerged from the adjoining suite, her professional attire perfectly suited for the day's high-stakes environment. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had built her reputation on calculated risks and decisive action. But Marcus could detect the underlying tension that came with knowing their company's future hinged on the next 48 hours. Ready for this? She asked, joining him on the balcony. Marcus nodded, though his stomach churned with anticipation. The reports are solid. Every vehicle checks out, according to our standards. That's not what I'm worried about, Isabella replied quietly. Victoria arrived yesterday with a delegation from 3 competing banks. They're here to watch us succeed or fail very publicly. The auction pavilion buzzed with controlled excitement as collectors, dealers, and automotive journalists gathered for the preview sessions. Marcus moved through the crowd with growing confidence, fielding questions about specific vehicles and providing insights that demonstrated his comprehensive understanding of both mechanical systems and market dynamics. At the center of the day's attention sat a 1957 Ferrari 250 Testarossa, one of only 22 ever built and the crown jewel of the auction. Marcus had spent weeks authenticating the vehicle's every component, tracing its racing history through decades of ownership changes and mechanical modifications. His conclusion that the car retained its original engine and transmission had cleared the way for an estimated sale price exceeding $8 million. Victoria Sterling appeared at Marcus's shoulder as he completed an explanation of the Ferrari's significance to a group of potential bidders. Her smile was polished but predatory, suggesting she had been waiting for this moment to deliver whatever challenge she had prepared. Mr. Rivera, Victoria said smoothly, I wonder if you might address some concerns that have been raised about your authentication of the Testarossa. Marcus felt the attention of nearby collectors focus on their conversation. What concerns? Victoria produced a tablet displaying high-resolution photographs of the Ferrari's engine bay. These images were taken by Heinrich Müller, the renowned European authentication expert. He believes certain casting marks on the engine block are inconsistent with 1957 Ferrari production standards. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Heinrich Müller's reputation was unassailable, and his questioning of Marcus's authentication could destroy not only the current sale but Montenegro financial services credibility in the luxury automotive market. Marcus studied the photographs, his mind racing through the technical details he had documented during his examination. Müller's analysis focuses on casting marks that were actually modified during the car's racing period. Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Those modifications are documented in period racing photographs and contemporary maintenance records. Are you suggesting that Heinrich Müller, with 40 years of Ferrari expertise, has overlooked crucial documentation? Victoria's tone suggested the question was rhetorical. Marcus felt the weight of every eye in the pavilion as collectors and journalists waited for his response. This was the moment Victoria had orchestrated, the public test designed to expose what she viewed as his inadequate credentials for such high-stakes work. I'm suggesting that authentication requires examining both the vehicle and its complete historical context, Marcus said clearly. The casting modifications Mr. Müller identified were performed by Scuderia Ferrari's workshop in 1958, following accident damage sustained during the Nürburgring 1,000 kilometers race. Marcus pulled out his own documentation, spreading period photographs and maintenance records across a nearby table. These workshop notes, written in Italian by Ferrari's chief mechanic, detail the casting work performed to repair the engine block while maintaining structural integrity. The crowd gathered closer as Marcus explained how the apparently anomalous casting marks actually provided evidence of the car's racing authenticity rather than suggesting later replacement or modification. His analysis demonstrated not only technical expertise, but the kind of historical research that separated genuine authentication from superficial examination. Victoria's confidence visibly wavered as Marcus's documentation proved both comprehensive and conclusive. Her attempt to discredit his work had instead provided a platform for him to demonstrate exactly the kind of thorough, contextual analysis that distinguished Montenegro Financial Services from traditional appraisal methods. Isabella stepped forward, her voice carrying absolute authority. "Mr. Rivera's authentication stands. Montenegro Financial Services guarantees the provenance and authenticity of every vehicle we evaluate." The Ferrari sold 2 hours later for $8.7 million, setting a new record for the model and validating Marcus's authentication beyond any possible dispute. As the gavel fell, applause filled the pavilion, acknowledging not just the successful sale but the dramatic vindication of Marcus's expertise. Victoria Sterling approached him during the evening reception, her manner noticeably different from their earlier confrontation. "You handled that situation well," she admitted. "Perhaps I underestimated the value of unconventional perspectives." Marcus accepted her acknowledgement graciously, understanding that Victoria's public concession represented both personal vindication and professional recognition from the broader collector community. The woman who had orchestrated months of challenges had become an unexpected source of validation. "Isabella chose well when she hired you," Victoria continued. "Montenegro Financial Services is fortunate to have someone who combines technical expertise with genuine passion for automotive history." As the weekend concluded and Marcus prepared to return home, he reflected on the journey that had brought him from a struggling garage owner to an internationally recognized automotive expert. The transformation had required not just technical knowledge but the development of confidence, diplomatic skills, and the ability to perform under pressure that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Isabella found him on the hotel balcony one final time, watching the sunset paint the Pacific Ocean in brilliant colors. "So what's next for Montenegro Financial Services star consultant?" Marcus smiled, thinking about Sophia's excitement when he called to describe the auction's success. "More challenging projects, I hope. And maybe some time to appreciate how far we've come." "We make a good team," Isabella said quietly, moving closer to him in a way that suggested their partnership had evolved beyond purely professional collaboration. Marcus turned to face her, recognizing the invitation in her words and manner. "Yes, we do." Their kiss was gentle but filled with promise, sealing a connection that had been building through months of shared challenges and mutual respect. They separated. Marcus understood that his life had been transformed not just professionally but personally, creating possibilities he had never imagined during his years of struggling to survive. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the renovated workshop behind Montenegro Financial Services headquarters, supervising the restoration of a 1938 Bugatti Type 57 that the bank had acquired as collateral for a defaulted loan. The space combined state-of-the-art equipment with the practical functionality he had learned to value during his years at Rivera's auto repair. Carlos had joined him as head mechanic, bringing the same enthusiasm and intuitive understanding that had made him invaluable. At the original garage, Sophia spent afternoons in the workshop, doing homework while observing restoration work that provided hands-on education about engineering, history, and craftsmanship. "Daddy," Sophia called from her table near the windows, "when I grow up, can I work with cars like you?" Marcus looked up from the Bugatti's engine bay, noting how his daughter's confidence had grown along with their family's security and opportunities. "You can do whatever you set your mind to, Mia. Cars, airplanes, rockets, anything that interests you." Isabella appeared in the workshop doorway, having adopted the habit of checking on their progress whenever her schedule permitted. She had become not just Marcus's professional partner, but an integral part of his and Sophia's life, bringing warmth and stability that complemented their existing bond. "How's our investment looking?" Isabella asked, gesturing toward the Bugatti. Better than expected, Marcus replied. This restoration will increase the value by at least 200%, and the publicity will establish Montenegro Financial Services as the premier institution for classic car financing. As the day wound down and the workshop grew quiet, Marcus reflected on the unexpected turns that had transformed his life from struggle to success, from isolation to partnership, from surviving to thriving. The business card Isabella had given him on that stormy night had indeed represented a doorway to possibilities he had never dared imagine. The future stretched ahead, filled with challenging projects, growing recognition, and the security that came from knowing his talents were valued and rewarded. But more than professional success, Marcus had discovered the profound satisfaction that came from building something meaningful with someone who shared his values and vision. As they locked up the workshop and prepared to head home together, Marcus understood that the best stories weren't about individual achievement, but about the connections that made success meaningful. He had found not just a career, but a partner, not just financial security, but a sense of purpose that extended far beyond his own circumstances. The garage where it all began still operated under Carlos's management, serving the working class neighborhood that had shaped Marcus's understanding of integrity and service. But now it was part of a larger network that included Montenegro Financial Services, expanding automotive division, and the restoration workshop where million-dollar classics received the same careful attention Marcus had once devoted to aging pickup trucks. Looking back at the workshop's illuminated windows and forward to the evening ahead with Isabella and Sophia, Marcus smiled at the remarkable journey that had brought them all together. Sometimes the most important repairs weren't mechanical at all, but the restoration of hope, trust, and the belief that talent and integrity would eventually find their proper recognition. The road ahead promised new challenges and opportunities, but Marcus faced them with the confidence of someone who had learned that authentic success was built not on credentials or connections, but on the willingness to help others while never compromising the values that defined who you really were. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.